then you need to buy a serial ATA adapter card. They make ones, they can go all the way back to PCI cards. So as long as you have at least one open PCI card slot, you can convert just about any motherboard to make use of serial ATA drives.
Well, I've got a more recent motherboard. It's just that my hard drive is really, really old.
Yeah, it's worth the money.
Okay.
Serial ATA, from the software perspective, can also do certain things that parallel ATA cannot do. Like it can schedule the read-write operations in a more optimal way. In other words, your operating system can simultaneously send like a bunch of commands and say, I want to read this sector, write to that sector, read from that sector, write to that sector, and so on. If the operations are performed as specified by the software, it may not be in the right order because you may have to go like from all the way from here, back here, and then all the way back there again, and all the way back here again. The serial ATA drives are capable of rescheduling the operations as long as they do not conflict. Then they can just reschedule everything and say, oh, these operations are pretty close together. I'll get all those done first. And then I move all the way over here and perform the 6 operations that are all around this area. So the newer drives are faster not only because the bus speed is faster, but also the drives are more capable. So I would definitely upgrade to a serial ATA drive, if there's no reason to keep the old one around. Any other questions so far? No questions? Yep.
It's kind of getting off when you talk about like in the future making like software more advanced using quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
In what sense?
That's a little bit out of the scope of this class, but if you look up quantum computers or qubit, that may not be the right word. Yep. Okay, a qubit.
I think it's pronounced qubit.
Qubit. Okay, qubit. A quantum bit is a unit of quantum information. It's the quantum analog of the classical bit with an additional dimensions associated with the quantum properties of a physical atom. So basically that's the, I'm not, really updated on, quantum computing.
In terms of energy?
It's basically a state thing. 1 is a state and 0 is a state. But a quantum thing can have more than one state at any particular time. So one, qubit can represent more than what we conventionally know as one single bit. But a quantum computer, using the qubit concept, can perform parallel processing beyond what we can imagine with our current type of processors. It's probably fun reading, but you might need to take, like 1 or 2, physics classes, in quantum physics before actually being able to understand the concepts in quantum computing. They also talk about entanglement, which is also a very interesting phenomenon. Basically, one thing happening at one place can be linked to some other thing that is at a certain distance away. So quantum physics is very interesting in many ways. Even Albert Einstein, he rejected quantum physics, back when quantum physics was first introduced. So as bright and as smart as a guy he was, he could not, see how quantum physics can be true. Yep.
I was going to say, if anybody's actually interested, there's a movie called What the Bleep Down the Rabbit Hole. It's all about quantum physics.
Say it again?
What the bleep down the rabbit hole?
What the bleep down the rabbit hole?
That's what it's called. It's all about quantum physics.
All right.
Okay.
There are also numerous Japanese animes that use quantum physics in one way or another as the backdrop of the sci-fi storyline. It's interesting how science fictions intended for like 15 or even 14-year-olds in Japan talk about quantum physics, entanglement, and almost every one of those terms in almost the right way. Okay, I would not say it's always right. Sometimes they have to stretch the physics a little bit to accommodate the storyline, But they utilize those concepts in a way that is actually pretty close to the physics of behind the quantum physics. So that's kind of interesting too. But back to serial ATA, this is the width of this entire plug is about half an inch wide, which is tiny compared to your parallel A to A ATA connector. And there's a new standard. The new standard is once again 6 gigabits per second. Okay, because it has to keep it up. Otherwise, USB 3 is going to surpass serial ATA. Okay. Are there any questions so far about the hard drive setup? Yep. No questions. What about this cache here? 16 megabytes of cache. It's not a processor, so what are we using the cache for?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean,
It's actually just a term. It's basically another term for buffer. Okay, we used to call that buffer, and now we call it cache. It's basically saying that if you want to write content to your hard drive, and your hard drive is slow because it's a physical entity, it will basically be able to be able to buffer up to 16 megabytes before it has to tell your processor and say, "Hey, slow down! I cannot handle write operations this fast." Okay, so the more cache, the better. But at some point, it's not going to help much anymore. Any questions? No question. Go ahead.
So what do you think would be a cutoff point for cache for a hard drive?
16 megabytes is probably fine for most applications. If you want to have really, really fast hard drive access, you can get caching controllers. You can get hard drive controllers that have built-in caching to it. Now you're talking about speed because those things have way more than 60 megabytes of cache. But we are talking about $300 or $400 just for the hard drive controller. Yep.
How would that compare to solid-state drives?
Solid-state drives are really fast. The only one thing you have to worry about solid-state drives is the number of write operations per sector is limited. Yep.
And do you know how many rates you have? Or does it just depend
They
on the-
usually give you some rating. If you look into solid-state hard drives, SSD, is it called? Right. Okay, the fatal gene of write endurance is basically it's a number that limits how many write operations. So let's see, what's wrong with the utopian? Okay, here we have 10,000 write cycles in 1994 and 100,000 write cycles in 1997. But that's only what the manufacturer tells you. It depends on manufacturers like temperature and many other aspects as well. But basically what this number says is if you have a solid-state hard drive, you can only be rewriting a particular sector up to 100,000 times according to this number before the sector is no longer writable. Okay? So that depends on the access pattern. There are file systems, out there. A file system is like NTFS, FAT32, those are what we call file systems. There are file systems out there that are optimized for solid-state drives. In other words, they try to balance and say, I'm not going to reuse the same sector over and over again. It will try to spread out the write operations throughout the entire hard drive. So that way, you won't kill one sector within like 2 months, while the rest of the hard drive is perfectly fine. You don't want to use FAT32 with a solid-state hard drive for sure. Because with FAT32, certain sectors will get overwritten, many times, throughout just a very short amount of time.
what file system is best for solid-state drives then?
I cannot remember the name, but I know there are ones that are particularly designed for SSD drives. So if you look up SSD file system, you will probably find something. Okay, well, you have NILFS, a file system to make SSDs scream. Basically, not only does it balance out the write operations, it's also optimized Because with a solid-state hard drive, the advantage is you don't have seek time anymore. You don't have rotational delay anymore. It is truly random access. I want to access that sector, bam, you're there. Okay, because you don't have to wait for the hard drive head to move. So fragmentation is not a problem anymore. But the new problem becomes a write balancing operation because you don't want to overwrite the same sector over and over and over again. And this particular operating system apparently will handle the write balancing while making sure you can get fast access to the files because fragmentation is not a problem. So you can trade one problem that we used to have with conventional hard drives, with the performance of a solid-state hard drive. So you can click it and see what it's saying here. And solid-state hard drives are definitely a lot faster than conventional hard drives. There's no question about it. They're very expensive too. For the amount of space that you're getting, they're very, very expensive. Skip. Okay, so where is that? Okay, there we have. SSL received a record that exceeds the maximum permissible length. Let's try. Oh, great. It's probably in Japanese. There you go. A file system to make. Oh, okay, so these are basically comments people are saying about it. The main article is on top right here. And this one seems to come with the newer Linux kernels too, so that's kind of neat. So there you go. They do have specialized file systems for solid-state hard drives, but I wouldn't even get there because it is still way too expensive for the money. Okay. Any more questions about selecting the hard drive or the mass store options? Does anyone run a RAID system on the desktop computer in this class? No, I'm the only one. No, do you run a RAID system on your? No. Look into it. Okay, it's interesting because it allows you to buy a whole bunch of smaller hard drives, like 250 gig hard drives. Sometimes you may even get those free because companies are upgrading the system and they're tossing away the 250 gig hard drives. You can basically get like 4 of those and combine them into a 750 gigabyte system with one for redundancy.
Wouldn't the problem with that though be the fact that the last 250 couldn't match all the 750 gigs you could put on the other 3?
They have to be of the same size.
Yeah, but you're saying you have 3 put together to give you 750 gigs of storage, and then the
Did I say 3 or 4?
You said 4 hard drives.
Yeah,
where
4
you put
hard.
3 together for storage, and then use the last one for redundancy.
Okay, if you want, you can. There are 2 ways to use 4 drives in this case. You can use 3 as the active drives and use 1 as a spare. If you use 3 as active drives, then you only get a capacity of 2. So if you have 4 250 gig hard drives, that means you only get 500 gigabytes out of the whole thing.
Okay.
However, you have built-in redundancy of 2 drives. 1 drive is hot or live all the time, which means you can have 1 drive die, and then the other drive it can still sustain the system, while using the 4th drive to integrate into the RAID system automatically.
Okay.
So that gives you a lot of redundancy because now you don't even have to replace the bad drive until your spare or one of your other 3 drives is also down. You need 2 drives out of 4 drives to be dead before you actually have to go out and buy another drive. Yep.